Something is fundamentally shifting in the world right now, and most Americans aren't seeing it clearly. The missiles flying across contested skies today aren't just weapons. They are political signals, economic instruments, and measurements of national will. Ballistic, cruise, and hypersonic. Each one tells a different story about who holds power, who is losing it, and where the next fault line in the global order is forming. The United States built its entire post-World War II security architecture on assumptions about speed, range, and interception. Those assumptions are now being stress-tested in real time. Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea have spent decades studying American military doctrine, not to copy it, but to break it. And the 5 facts you're about to hear aren't found in mainstream headlines, because mainstream headlines aren't designed to inform you, they're designed to manage you. So if you've been sensing that something enormous is moving beneath the surface of world events, you're right. And it starts here. Let's begin with the first fact, and it's one that reshapes everything you thought you understood about modern warfare. A ballistic missile is not simply a rocket with a warhead attached to it. It is a machine that obeys physics more than it obeys the person who launched it. Once a ballistic missile leaves the ground and clears the atmosphere, it follows a predictable arc, a trajectory governed entirely by gravity and momentum. That sounds simple, but the implications of that simplicity are enormous, because predictability in the world of missile defense is both a weakness and a trap. The United States spent hundreds of billions of dollars building missile defense systems precisely because ballistic missiles follow that arc. The theory was straightforward: track the arc, intercept the warhead, neutralize the threat. And for decades, that theory held enough water to justify the investment. But here is what changed. Adversaries studied the theory too, and they began engineering around it. The moment you understand that your enemy's defense is built on predicting your path, you start building missiles that don't follow a predictable path. That is the entire strategic logic behind the hypersonic glide vehicle, which we will get to. But first, you need to sit with this foundational reality. Ballistic missiles defined the Cold War, shaped every major arms treaty, and restructured the political geography of the entire planet. When the Soviet Union tested its first intercontinental ballistic missile in 1957, it didn't just send a rocket into the sky, it sent a message to Washington that said, "Your oceans no longer protect you." That was the real payload, not the warhead, the message. Now the second fact moves us into a completely different category of weapon, and honestly, into a completely different philosophy of war. Cruise missiles are not ballistic. They do not arc into space and fall back down. They fly. They have wings. They have engines. They navigate through terrain. They hug the Earth's surface. They can fly below radar. They can make turns. They can loiter. And in some modern versions, they can even change their target mid-flight. The cruise missile is, in many ways, a thinking weapon, and that distinction matters more than most people realize. When Russia launched cruise missiles into Ukraine in the opening phase of the conflict, Western analysts were startled not just by the volume, but by the variety. Different types, different trajectories, different altitudes, different flight profiles, all deliberately mixed to overwhelm and confuse air defense systems. That is not an accident of logistics, that is doctrine. The Russian military, drawing on decades of studying NATO air defense architecture, concluded that the most effective way to penetrate sophisticated air defenses is not to build a faster missile, it is to build a more confusing one. Send 20 missiles from 5 different directions at 3 different altitudes, and even the best air defense system in the world starts running out of interceptors and processing time simultaneously. This is called saturation, and it is one of the most important concepts in modern warfare that almost nobody in mainstream American media explains to you honestly. The third fact is where things get philosophically uncomfortable, and I want you to stay with this because it connects directly to the geopolitical shifts that are reshaping American power right now. The United States built its post-Cold War military dominance on the assumption of air superiority. Every major American military campaign since 1991 began with the systematic destruction of enemy air defenses, followed by unrestricted air operations, followed by ground forces moving into a permissive environment. Desert Storm, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, the template was the same every single time. Shock and awe was not poetry. It was a repeatable industrial process, and that process depended fundamentally on the inability of adversaries to threaten American aircraft, American ships, and American forward bases. Missiles changed that calculus entirely. China understood this before almost anyone in Washington wanted to admit it. Beginning in the 1990s, China invested heavily not in trying to match the American Navy ship for ship, or trying to match the American Air Force plane for plane. Instead, China built missiles. Specifically, China built anti-ship ballistic missiles, weapons designed to kill aircraft carriers at ranges exceeding 1,000 miles. Think about what that means strategically. An aircraft carrier is the physical embodiment of American power projection. It is the instrument through which Washington has, for 80 years, told every nation on Earth, "We can reach you, we can strike you, and there is nothing you can do to stop us." A missile that can reliably threaten an aircraft carrier does not just destroy a ship. It destroys an entire strategic logic. It dissolves the foundation of American hegemony in the Pacific. And China built it anyway, and Washington spent 2 decades pretending it wasn't a serious threat. The fourth fact brings us to hypersonic missiles, and I want to be precise here because the word hypersonic gets used loosely in ways that obscure more than they reveal. Technically, hypersonic means traveling at Mach 5 or faster, 5 times the speed of sound. But speed alone is not what makes hypersonic weapons revolutionary. Ballistic missile warheads already travel at hypersonic speeds during their terminal phase, during the final descent toward the target. What makes modern hypersonic weapons genuinely new and genuinely destabilizing is the combination of speed with maneuverability. A hypersonic glide vehicle is launched on a ballistic missile to high altitude, but then it separates and glides back through the upper atmosphere, and while it glides, it maneuvers. It changes course, it changes altitude, it does not follow a predictable arc, and it does all of this at speeds that compress the warning time available to defenders down to minutes, sometimes seconds. The existing American missile defense architecture was not designed for this. The radar systems, the interceptor missiles, the command and control networks, all of it was engineered around the predictable physics of ballistic trajectories. A maneuvering hypersonic glide vehicle moving at Mach 10 through the upper atmosphere is, for practical purposes, currently undefendable with existing technology. Russia fielded its avant-garde hypersonic glide vehicle and declared it operational in 2019. China has tested the DF-17 hypersonic glide vehicle repeatedly. Both countries announced these capabilities publicly, which is itself a strategic communication. They wanted Washington to know, they wanted the entire world to know, because the message embedded in those announcements was precise and deliberate. The missile defense shield that America spent hundreds of billions of dollars constructing is no longer a shield. It is theater. Now I want to connect these 4 facts to something much larger, because this is where the analysis has to become honest in a way that makes people uncomfortable. The United States is not losing a technology race. Technology can be caught up with, and America has enormous technological capacity. What the United States is navigating and struggling with is a strategic transition that no dominant power in history has managed gracefully. The transition from unipolar dominance to a multipolar world where military deterrence is genuinely mutual. During the Cold War, deterrence was mutual between 2 superpowers. Then the Soviet Union collapsed, and for roughly 20 years, American power was so overwhelming that the concept of deterrence became asymmetric. America could strike, others could not meaningfully strike back. That asymmetry shaped everything. American foreign policy, American financial dominance through the dollar system, American willingness to intervene militarily anywhere on the planet with minimal strategic risk to the homeland. Missiles, specifically the development of long-range precision missiles by Russia and China, are the physical mechanism through which that asymmetry is being dismantled. This is not an opinion. This is the observable reality of what is happening right now in the global order. The 5th fact, and in some ways the most important one, is about what missiles reveal about the economic and industrial foundations of national power. War in the modern era is not won by courage alone or even by technology alone. It is won by production capacity, by the ability to manufacture weapons faster than the enemy can destroy them, and this is where the conflict in Ukraine has provided the most startling and honest intelligence assessment that the world has seen in decades. Not from spy satellites or intercepted communications, but simply from watching what happened when a major land war in Europe consumed missiles, artillery shells, and air defense interceptors at rates that nobody in Western defense establishments had seriously planned for. Ukraine's air defense system, equipped largely with Western-supplied interceptors, has been under sustained pressure from Russian cruise missile and ballistic missile attacks since the beginning of the conflict. And what the world discovered, watching this unfold in real time, is that the United States and NATO do not have the industrial production capacity to sustain high-intensity missile warfare over a prolonged period. American defense manufacturing was optimized over 30 years for a world where America fought limited wars against adversaries who couldn't fight back meaningfully. It was not optimized for a world where missiles are being fired and consumed by the thousands per month. Russia, meanwhile, despite all Western predictions that sanctions would collapse its military production, increased its artillery shell production, its missile production, and its drone production throughout 2023 and into 2024. Not because Russia has a superior economy. Russia's economy is significantly smaller than America's, but because Russia made the political decision to subordinate significant portions of its economy to wartime production. And in a conflict that is fundamentally about industrial endurance, that decision carries weight that no amount of Western financial sanctions has been able to neutralize. This brings us to something that the 5 missile facts taken together illuminate about the changing structure of global power. The post-World War II order was built on American military and economic dominance. That dominance was real, it was earned, and for several decades it provided a form of global stability. Imperfect, often unjust, but structurally stable. The missile technology revolution that has unfolded over the past 20 years has not simply created new weapons. It has created new deterrence realities. Nations that previously had no ability to impose serious military costs on American power now have that ability. That changes their diplomatic behavior. It changes their willingness to say no to American demands. It changes the structure of every international negotiation, every trade agreement, every conversation about sovereignty and spheres of influence. When a country can field missiles that can strike American carriers, American bases, and American allies at long range with high precision, that country negotiates differently than it did when it had no such capability. This is not a moral argument about whether that is good or bad for the world. It is a structural observation about how power actually functions. Power is not an abstraction. It is a physical reality enforced by the credible threat of consequences. And when the distribution of physical military capability changes, the distribution of political power changes with it. What Americans deserve to understand, and what most of the mainstream conversation completely fails to provide, is that the missile technology shifts we are living through are not peripheral news items. They are not stories about distant conflicts that don't affect daily life in Cincinnati or Phoenix or Charlotte. They are the physical mechanism through which the global economic order that underlies American prosperity is being renegotiated. The dollar's global reserve status, American ability to impose sanctions that actually work, American capacity to guarantee security commitments to allies across Europe and Asia, all of these depend ultimately on the credibility of American military power. And the credibility of American military power depends ultimately on whether adversaries believe that American forces can project power without suffering unacceptable losses. Hypersonic glide vehicles, anti-ship ballistic missiles, long-range cruise missiles capable of saturation attacks. These are the physical arguments being made by Russia and China against the credibility of American power projection. And those arguments are not being made in diplomatic language. They are being made in steel and rocket fuel, and they are being demonstrated in real operational environments, and the rest of the world is watching and drawing its own conclusions. There is one more dimension to all of this that I think deserves serious reflection, and it has to do with the moral and philosophical framework through which Americans are being asked to understand these changes. The dominant narrative in American media treats every advancement in Russian or Chinese missile capability as an act of aggression, as evidence of malign intent, as a threat to the free world. And there are legitimate concerns embedded in that narrative. But the narrative is incomplete in a way that prevents honest analysis. Because the United States has been the world's most prolific developer and user of precision missile technology for the past 40 years. American cruise missiles struck targets in Iraq, Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, Sudan, Libya, Syria, and elsewhere. American ballistic missiles sit in submarines circling the globe at this moment. American missile defense systems are deployed in South Korea, Japan, Romania, and Poland, positioned directly on the borders of Russia and China. The development of Russian and Chinese missile capabilities did not happen in a vacuum. It happened in direct response to the observable reality of American missile dominance and American willingness to use that dominance. Understanding this does not mean endorsing Russian or Chinese foreign policy. It means understanding causality, and without understanding causality, you cannot understand the world as it actually is. You can only understand it as the people managing your perception of it want you to understand it. And that ultimately is why these 5 missile facts matter far beyond the technical details of propulsion systems and guidance mechanisms and warhead yields. They matter because they are a window into the real architecture of global power at a moment when that architecture is changing faster than at any point since 1991. The Americans who are searching for real information, not managed information, not narrative-shaped information, but honest analysis of what is actually happening and why, deserve to have these facts presented with the full weight of their strategic implications. Missiles are not just weapons. They are votes cast in the ongoing global referendum on who holds power, who is losing it, and what kind of world is being built in the space where American unipolarity used to be. The trajectory of that referendum is not yet determined. But you cannot participate intelligently in understanding it or in the democratic debates that should flow from it if the information you are receiving has been pre-digested, pre-framed, and pre-concluded for you. That is what this conversation is trying to offer. Not conclusions, but clarity. Not fear, but understanding. Because understanding is the only durable foundation for navigating what comes next.